Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing something pretty ambitious. We're going to walk into the world's biggest library and build a clear, foundational blueprint to organize, well, every single piece of human writing ever created. We're going to take thousands of years of human thought and map it out so you can see exactly how it all fits together. Just imagine standing in front of millions of books. It's breathtaking, sure, but let's be honest, it's also incredibly paralyzing. I mean, how do you categorize everything from ancient Greek epics to modern biographies of tech CEOs without getting completely overwhelmed? How do you even know what you're actually looking at when you open a book? So, to solve this, we're going to map out 5 main pillars: poetry, drama, fiction, nonfiction, and criticism. That's our complete roadmap for today's explainer. Let's start right at the beginning with pillar number 1, poetry, exploring rhythm and emotion. Now, poetry obviously relies on rhythm, meter, and really compressed language. But historically, it's actually organized across this fascinating philosophical split. On one side, you have objective poetry. This is where the poet is basically just an observer narrating external actions and events. And on the other side, subjective poetry. This is where we dive intimately into deeply personal, internal emotions and thoughts. And you could actually see this structural divide right in the forms themselves. Objective forms like the ballad, the grand epic, or those medieval metrical romances like Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, they're built to narrate grand stories and heroic deeds. But then you look at subjective forms like the sonnet or Thomas Gray's famous elegy, and those are intensely personal. They're raw expressions of human vulnerability. Just take the Epithalamion, for example. It's a highly specific, totally joyous poem crafted exclusively to celebrate a wedding. It really just goes to show exactly how hyper-specialized these internal emotional expressions can get when we want to mark specific human milestones. To anchor this concept in reality, think of Samuel Taylor Coleridge's Cursed Sailor in The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. That is classic objective action, a narrative just rapidly unfolding. Now contrast that with the chilling, character-revealing speech of Robert Browning's Duke in My Last Duchess. The Duke inadvertently reveals his own dark psychology, making it a perfect, albeit deeply unsettling, example of subjective poetry. Moving right along to our second pillar, drama, scripts and stage. Drama is all about literature leaping off the page, right? It relies entirely on dialogue and precise stage directions. And historically, this architectural blueprint splits right down the middle based on how things wrap up. You've got the lighthearted social resolutions of comedy on one end versus the somber, inevitable downfall of tragedy on the other. From that basic binary, some really incredible specializations emerge. Comedy branches out into everything from the eccentric characters in a comedy of humors to the bawdy social intrigue of restoration comedies. And tragedy? Well, that gets dark fast. We're talking vengeance-fueled Elizabethan plots and the massive, superhuman conflicts you find in heroic drama. A perfect example of how ancient architecture shapes modern works is the Senecan tragedy. Originating in Rome, this style is completely obsessed with fate and madness. You get these long monologues and violent action that happens entirely off-stage. It's a foundational blueprint that heavily influenced the European drama that followed it. And this split is exactly how we get such wildly opposing masterpieces. On one hand, you have the catastrophic, bloody ambition of Shakespeare's Macbeth, a quintessential tragedy. And sitting right alongside it, you have the sparkling, brilliant social satire of Oscar Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest, which is just an absolute masterclass in the comedy of manners. That brings us to our third pillar, fiction, and the power of imagination. Fiction abandons strict facts to construct entirely imagined narratives, and it's largely categorized by length and format. We see deep world-building romances like Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, bite-sized psychological horrors like Poe's The Telltale Heart, and of course, the sprawling complexity of the novel, brilliantly exemplified by Mary Shelley's foundational text, Frankenstein. Now, what's really fascinating here is how the novel itself splinters into these wildly different structural moods. You can have an epistolary novel built entirely out of diaries and letters, a regional novel capturing really specific local geographic color, or a Gothic novel just steeped in fear and gloom. To truly appreciate the variety, we have to look at the picaresque. This is a fantastic early format originating in Spain. You basically follow a lovable rogue, a pícaro, who has to survive in a corrupt society entirely by his wits. It's this episodic structure that essentially gave birth to the modern anti-hero stories we all know and love today. Stepping right into the fourth pillar now, nonfiction, exploring factual worlds. So this pillar crosses the boundary right back into reality, and it houses literature of immense historical impact. We're talking world-changing arguments like Thomas Paine's Common Sense, deeply intimate first-person accounts like the autobiography of Malcolm X, and meticulous documentation of modern innovators like Walter Isaacson's Steve Jobs. Finally, we reach our fifth, and maybe most intriguing pillar, criticism, analyzing the text. Now, criticism is unique in our architecture. Why? Because it isn't creative writing itself, it's a body of literature entirely about literature. It acts as our analytical toolkit. It provides the frameworks, the methods, and the theories we actually need to dissect and interpret all those incredible works found in our first four pillars. As impartial observers, we can use these diverse analytical lenses to completely change the meaning of a text. You could apply Marxist theory to examine class struggles and economic power dynamics. Or, actually, you could use psychoanalytic theory to dig into the unconscious motivations of the exact same characters. You might use feminist theory to examine gender relations, or archetypal theory to uncover ancient recurrent myths. Every single lens completely rewires how you read the exact same book.
When we step back and look at our completed blueprint, it's pretty amazing. We see that these 5 pillars, poetry, drama, fiction, nonfiction, and criticism, they aren't just rigid, dusty categories. Not at all. They form a massive, interconnected, and beautifully vibrant ecosystem of human thought and expression.
Now that you understand the architecture of all literature, the power is entirely in your hands. The next time you open a book, you'll know exactly where it fits in the grand scheme of human writing. So my question to you, to wrap up this explainer, which of these critical frameworks will you bring to the very next book you open?